Is the mustache too much? Autofocus, don't fail me now. So yes, I had two full-time remote six-figure positions at the same time. They didn't know about each other, and it completely changed my life. I went from having less than $5,000 in the bank to a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio, a house in Tennessee that made over $135,000 last year, 3 houses in West Virginia, an amazing house in Joshua Tree that got written up in Dwell magazine, 6 more new builds on the way currently in Joshua Tree, my dream homes are being built, a new car, my pilot's license, my own airplane. My life is unrecognizable to how it was a couple years ago. And this all happened in the span of less than 3 years. And I'm gonna tell you the story of how it happened, my tips, what I learned along the way, and at the end, maybe you'll decide if this is something you wanna do. Not only did this change my life, but it also changed the way I look at money and investing and all sorts of stuff. It's remarkable not just what changed in my life, but what changed in my brain along the way. But first, let me give you some context. In 2017, I'd been living in the Bay Area for about 6 years. I was a software engineer, and I can tell you everything about the show Silicon Valley is completely true. They nailed it. Side note, Mike Judge, who wrote Silicon Valley and Office Space, was a former Silicon Valley engineer in the 80s, so it comes from experience. But yeah, I was writing code. I was your typical software engineer. I've been to every major company, Apple, Google, Oculus, Ring Doorbell, Nest, almost everything you can imagine. And I was miserable. I was beyond miserable. It's like that scene from Office Space where he's at the hypnotist.
What about today? Is today the worst day of your life?
Yeah.
That was my life.
Wow, that's messed up.
It was really nobody's fault but mine. It's the way I'm wired. I knew that I was meant for something different. On my free time, we were doing trips to Napa, snowboarding a lot, in Tahoe. I was doing stand-up just as an outlet. I needed to do something. And yeah, I was horrible at it.
This is what I see on TV. So I'm not a...
Right? It takes a while. That video's from like my 8th time on stage. Side note, the Dunning-Kruger effect is important in places like comedy, but it helps you get through those crappy times. If I'd kept going, I'm sure I would have gotten a lot better, but here we are. But yeah, I was heartbroken. I had just gotten out of a horrible relationship. I was a horrible employee. I was taking lunch for 2 hours. I was coming in late. I was leaving early. It just so happened I worked next to an airport. And so every day I would walk over to the airport and just stand on the fence, the San Jose airport, and watch jets take off, just hoping for something else. I would look out for the sunny California weather every day and think, I gotta be doing something else. So my boss came up to my desk one day and said, hey, I gotta talk to you. And I said, I gotta talk to you. And I walked into his office, I sat down, and I said, I quit.
It's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
And in the spur of the moment, I said, I'm going to Los Angeles. Now, I'm not a big fan of the Bay Area. I'm not a big fan of Los Angeles. It's got some great stuff. At least New York is honest that it's gonna be grungy. Yeah. But I went down there, and I started a new life. I started doing improv, I kept doing bad comedy, and one day the job that I had quit from called me and said, hey, we want you to work remotely. Would you like to come back? Well, this was 2017, so remote work wasn't yet a thing that was widespread like it is today. It's hard to believe how much the world has changed in the last couple of years. But I said, yeah, they gave me a pay raise, and I went back to work remote. So I just spent the next year or so working remotely. And I did a lot of things. I went to Europe. I went to Oktoberfest a few times. I had no office to go to. This was great. And after a while, I noticed, like a lot of us have during COVID, that I wasn't putting in that many hours. My work was efficient. I was working a couple hours a day max. And I thought, how can I even make this more efficient? I ended up going online to the website Fiverr and finding engineers to help me do my work. And even though I was working a couple hours a day, I was able to outsource most of that and all of a sudden work almost no hours a day. I took a lot of trips and life got even better. And this is the first tip if you're gonna do this, is you really need to get things in order. You need to make sure that everything is logged in, and you can't be doing this if you're working 8 hours a day, really. Whatever your job is, you need to make sure if you're gonna do this, that things are organized. And if you're lucky enough to have a job that doesn't force you to work 8 hours a day, you can work on your own schedule, then this becomes a lot easier to do. So all of a sudden, in my own head, I was presented with a question, which is, what am I gonna do with this extra time? I could have just had leisure time, but going back to when I was an engineer in the Bay Area, I knew that I wanted to do something else. And so I thought, I need to get ahead in life. I was making 6 figures and I still was having trouble getting ahead. So all of a sudden,
I think
I had an idea.
Yeah, I just had an idea.
What if I got another remote job at the same time? Now, nowadays, this is pretty normal. There's subreddits for this, there's articles that have been written, there's posts all over the internet, you probably come across them. But at the time, it wasn't something that a lot of people knew about. And most people's reaction when I said I had this idea was, are you crazy? Yeah, I am a little crazy. I think it's fine. But I knew that if I was able to do this, I would be able to save an entire 6-figure salary. And I could put that all in the bank. And if I was able to hold this job for a while, I'd be able to do all kinds of stuff with that money. Invest, build houses, get into real estate, whatever I wanted to do. I have other side projects that I wanted to do, and this would kind of open me up to do that. So it was worth a shot. So I dusted off my resume, I churched it up really good. My resume is kind of my Don Quixote, but I knew that if I could get to a job, I could perform. So I eventually went on LinkedIn, and the key to LinkedIn was I was able to use something called Easy Apply. And at first I started applying to a lot of jobs. I was getting no replies, but I noticed that there were a lot of applicants in those jobs. And this is another tip I have, which is if you're gonna be doing this, you want to be looking for jobs that don't have a lot of applicants. It's gonna get you farther faster. So what I did, I went on LinkedIn and I started looking for jobs. Now this is one of the tips that I would have to say is there's a certain type of job that you're looking for if you're gonna have multiple remote jobs. And if you're doing this, you probably are looking for something that has less of a workload, or looking for something that has less of a workload. One thing to note is that I kind of changed my job, meaning I actively changed my responsibilities from doing basic software engineering to more of a sales engineering role, more of an account management role. This was super key because account management is something that can be done more on your time. Yes, you have meetings with clients, but you can set those meetings. And as you're managing things, managing sales, you can do that on your own time. And things like that are a little more abstract than writing code and having specific deliverables. So one of the things that I did was I looked for sales engineering roles or account management roles. Now you might not be an engineer, but account management, I believe, is the key. Sales is the key, and remote is obviously the key. So I went on LinkedIn and I would search remote account management, remote sales engineer in my case, and just started looking for these positions. I started looking for jobs that have under 10 applicants. On LinkedIn, you can filter by certain things like Easy Apply, which allows you to apply within a couple minutes to a job. Your resume is already stored on there. And in addition, you can do things like under 10 applicants. So I was getting in early to a job that might have a lot of applicants, or I was getting to a job that not a lot of people were applying to, which may seem like a bad thing, but for what we're doing, it's not. And once I did that, I started getting a lot of replies. And also, what you'll notice is doing this is also good exercise because rehearsing or practicing anything, it's gonna get you a lot of reps and you're gonna get better at interviewing. You almost might want to do this even if you're not looking for 2 jobs. If you're looking for a single job or whatever, it's just apply to a ton of jobs, especially ones with low applicants, because you're gonna be talking to recruiters and you're gonna get better at it. So I started talking to recruiters and I finally got a fish on the hook. I got an interview set up, I flew up, sat in front of the CEO, the director of technology. I knew nothing about what I was talking about, but a week before I went on LinkedIn and looked at the competitors. I messaged a bunch of people that worked in similar positions and asked, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I'm trying to get into this industry and I'd love to get your thoughts and any tips you have on interviewing. If you're looking for a job, I would just suggest doing that anyway. And again, you have to know what your goal is. My goal here was to save money so that I could get out of the rat race. But my goal here was not to have a super prestigious position. I wanted something that was gonna bring me money, I could complete the tasks, and go on my merry way.
That'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
So voila, they offered me the position. I had to fly up there once a week, which is crazy, but I said, I can figure this out, I can do it. And I started. They actually offered me way more. My starting salary was $180,000, which was a lot more than I was making at my other company. And I actually had a moment where I said, hey, maybe I just need one job and I should quit the other job. The other job wasn't going very well anyway. And I actually pulled out my phone at one point and started to text my boss that I might be moving on. Him and I were friends, and right before I sent that text message, I actually got distracted. I put my phone away, did whatever I was doing, and I didn't do that. So I walked into this new position the first day. I would suggest not working for a company that only has 10 or 20 employees. This one had about 90, and it worked out well. I walked in, I shook hands with some people, they gave me an office, I sat down, and calls started coming in for my other job. I literally had to go outside and take calls from the other job. It was insane. I didn't know what I was doing, But in the corporate world, which is ridiculous anyways, a lot of times none of us do. That's the thing about a lot of these companies, company like Intel, where their technology is made by a couple of very, very intelligent, very educated, very well paid people, and they bring in a lot of money from that. So there's a lot of bureaucracy. And if you're doing this, you might want to find yourself positions that are in that muck of bureaucracy. And you might find your way out of it someday. So I sat down and I figured, what am I supposed to do? I started taking meetings with everybody else to try to get to know people and see what was going on. The first guy walks in, he's about 40 years old. You can tell he's grizzled, life's beat him down. He sits down, he shuts the door, he looks at me, and I'm this green, not knowing what I'm doing here person. He looks at me in the eye, and before I could get any words out, he says, "You need to leave this company. This is the worst place I've ever worked in my life." Wow. Normally that would be a bad thing, but in my case, cool. I just have to get through this. I ended up hearing the same thing from other people I talked to. Apparently the president of the company who I'd interviewed with was an alcoholic. He was a gambling addict. He owed money to a lot of the people that work there. He came to work hungover all the time. There were a lot of other things wrong with him. Yeah, and I was working directly below this guy. So over the next couple months, I just hung in there. I would fly home, I'd work on the other job, and life got insane. And this is something to note, if you're gonna do this, even if you have everything locked in, like I said in the beginning, there's gonna be times that are gonna be crazy. I was taking meetings with one company while at the office with the other company. I was in the hallway on the phone, and then I would run back in. People probably thought I had a lot of IBS or something. I don't know. I don't care. There was a day when I literally had a meeting in the morning in San Jose. I flew from LAX to San Jose Airport at like 6 a.m. I had a meeting, went to a steakhouse lunch, took an early flight on Southwest back to LAX, grabbed my bag, ran across the terminals, caught an Air Canada flight that night to go up to Vancouver and have a dinner meeting with some delicious oysters that night. I hung out that weekend with some friends that I know up there. I came home Sunday night. Life was crazy. I ended up going to my cousin's wedding in Thailand because this was remote and taking a meeting at 5 in the morning in Bangkok. So things kind of went on like that. And over time, my bank account started to grow. I went from having 5 grand to 10 grand to 20 grand to 40 grand. And all of a sudden, before I knew it, I had 6 figures in the bank. And yeah, my hair was falling out. Luckily, it's still there. Why am I itchy? I didn't know how long I could do this. I was still doing comedy and improv. I would have to take calls with India between shows. Ugh, it actually gets me excited just thinking about it. And after time went on, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I had saved money, and it just so happened to be that one of the guys that I was doing improv with was building a house in Joshua Tree, and he was on a path that I really wanted to be on. And I said, "Hey, I got some cash. I'm just curious what you think I should do with it." Looking for advice. He said, "Well, why don't we build a house in Joshua Tree?" And 2 weeks later, I bought land cash in the village in Joshua Tree, and we started our first build. I learned a ton of stuff. It changed my life. Find somebody else that's doing the same thing that you want, contact them. They'll want to work with you. If you can bring something to the table, then they'll work with you. That's how you find investors. So we started building, and I realized, oh wow, all this work I had done the past year was starting to come to fruition. I was building something that was going to give me passive income and allow me to get out of the rat race. And I didn't need this second job anymore. So I made the decision, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and quit. And I ended up flying up to the Bay Area, to the office. I met the CEO. Again, this company was not the greatest run company. I think the guy was golfing. I finally got a hold of him, and he said, "Hey, I gotta talk to you." He pulled me into his office. He said, "Hey, we ran out of funding. We lost like $14 million from Korea that we had and some Series B funding. I hate to say this, but we're gonna have to let you go." I said, "Oh, that's a bummer." And he said, "I feel bad. I'm gonna give you 3 months severance." Great. I had 3 months extra pay. I got fired from the job and then took that money and used it into the project I was doing. I still kept the first job, and that's how I did it. It was really hard. It was one of the hardest things I've done besides learning to fly. And after that, things were moving. We finished that house. It got written up in Dwell magazine. It got written up in all kinds of places. We were making more money than we thought we would make with it. We ended up selling that house because we got a great offer. We parlayed that into all kinds of other stuff. One thing I forgot to mention is we got land in Virginia and we're building a tiny home village there. My life is unrecognizable to how it was before. And I have all of this knowledge on how to do this. Anybody can do this. Anybody can get a second job. Anybody can find a way to hustle and make extra money. The best way to do it is probably get a salaried position like I did that's remote and stack some cash, and then you can start. The housing market's gone crazy, but there's still opportunities out there. And I have that information. Part of this channel is going to be me giving that information to you because I love doing that. I love teaching people this stuff. I like optimizing my life for freedom, and ironically, you do that by working hard, by having not much freedom for a while. And that's what you got to do. So if anybody's out there is thinking whether or not they want to do this, I would say go for it, but know that you're risking everything. I could have gotten fired at any point. I really could have. In fact, I was on a date with a girl while I was doing this. She worked in HR, and when she asked me what I do, I started kind of unfolding this whole story to her, and she had a panic attack, so much so that she ended the date and said, "You should be in jail." I thought that was an overreaction and kind of funny, but when you're miserable at your job, when you're in that office space kind of situation, you know, you gotta find something and you gotta fight. And that's what I did. Look, a lot of us know out there with COVID, with the way things have changed the last couple of years, that we can all do this. And that's gonna lead you to different places to do whatever it is you wanna do. I am here to teach you how to build wealth, and that first step, that first pillar, is stacking as much money as you can to do that, because you need to make that leap. So if you have any questions about how to do this, just ask them in the comments and I will answer every one of them if anybody actually watches this video. And if you want to hear other people who have done this, I have a podcast called How to Quit Your Day Job, where I interview people who have created a product or some sort of following or whatever it is, monetized it, and gotten out of the rat race and quit their 9-to-5 job, which is what this is all about. So subscribe to my new channel if you want to learn how to do this, and make love to that like button, and I'll see you on the next video.